back again with another Swing Downs Funky album review. Today we're doing Bob Marley and the Wailers, Catch a Fire. Fire. You might be thinking, if this is a funky album review, why are you doing reggae? Bob Marley's reggae. Well, we're going to talk about that today. Reggae is funk before funk was what we know of today. This came out in 1973. Although this particular album I have says 1970. So there is a little bit of discrepancy. There was an original pressing of this and then a refurbished pressing. So the story goes, Chris Blackwell, the guy from Island Records, I guess in the late 60s, early 70s, looking for new talent. Quick note, probably the best thing about the 70s, 60s, and 70s music is that these recording companies were going across the world looking for new music. And part of that was this guy, Chris Blackwell from Ireland, going to Jamaica. And the Wailers were a hit in Jamaica in the 60s. No one knew about them anywhere else. But they were, the most popular group in Jamaica. Chris Blackwell says, hey, let's record them. So he gives them money to make a demo. And people said, if you don't know the story, people said, you're not going to see your money. You're not going to see an album. You're not going to even see those guys again, probably. Not the smartest move. And so a few months later, or whatever it was, he flew down to Jamaica, checked in with the Wailers, and he says, his quote was something like, he knew enough about recording to understand or to realize that they put every penny he gave them into that demo. So they took that demo, went to England, and re-recorded it. So they have one version called the Jamaican version of Catch a Fire, and another version, the official released version of Catch a Fire. So you have two versions of the same album, both unique, and it's actually on most streaming services, Spotify and whatnot. You can check back and forth between the two albums, which is really cool. So how I got into Bob Marley, I was about 12 in a restaurant with my grandmother, and the music in the restaurant just kind of caught me. And I couldn't really explain it. I was 12, so it was before I smoked any weed. So it wasn't that. So I went to one of the waiters or the bartender and I was like, hey, what song is this? And the guy was like, dude, it's Bob Marley. And I'm like, I'm 12. I don't know who Bob Marley is. So luckily that was the time of Kazaa and LimeWire. So I immediately went home and downloaded every Bob Marley song that came up. And I got hooked. Say hello. Another note, Bob Marley in the 60s, or the Wailers, in the 60s, were rhythmically tight. Rhythmically, they had it going on. Whatever they learned from the Rastas, whatever spiritual growth they were putting forth, whatever they were growing into, had a lot to do with rhythm. Clearly, if you listen to songs like Put It On, the 60s version of Put It On, if you listen to songs like Rainbow Country, that is rhythmically, it's on the one. They knew it. And the more we get into album reviews, the more we're going to find that that's a theme. The one. Not just the one. Everything changes on the one. And part one to part two to the bridge, switches on the one. It's not the switch. It's the emphasis of it all. How much heart you put into it. And it's kind of like a religion in its own. The rhythm. And you'll see the best groups and the songs that you love the most have that same connection. James Brown, Sly Stone, Parliament, Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley, they all worshipped the rhythm. And that's life. keeps you in rhythm. If you could stay in rhythm, things flow. It's like a good date. So moving on. So let's actually talk about the album now. So I'm giving it a 28 out of 33. It's a great album. 28 is a great score. 30, anything above 30 is extra, which is reserved for some of the most flawless best. So if you can make it to about 30, that's a really good score, and this is a really good album. So I have my ratings: funk factor, musicianship, and originality, both out of 11 to total 33. Just a quick review: funk factor has a lot to do with rhythm, has a lot to do with spacing, has a lot to do with the sounds involved, the sonic sounds, sonically. And then there's musicianship, which of course is obviously the talent of each musician. It's not always they have to be the best. It's just the cleanliness of the album, the recording. It's not always the best live. You don't have to be Jimi Hendrix. But for the recording's purpose, for what you're trying to get, the theme, the cause, what you're trying to get through to the people, the playing ability of the individuals mixed with the playing ability of the band mixed with their overall vibe and concept, musicianship. And then originality. Is it original? Is it unique? Is it different? Did it break ground? So, giving this album a 28, I'm starting with funk factor is a 9, which is huge. To me, Carlton Barrett, the drummer of the Wailers, invented this style of drumming. And then you could see through the years, starting in the 60s, through this first album, first real studio recorded album in the early 70s, all the way into the early 80s, he just kept improving it, and all the other reggae bands and drummers followed suit. And it really made reggae drumming what reggae drumming is. Carlton Barrett, his brother was the bassist, and they were just, they were brothers, so they had that connection already. And he did the kick and the snare at the same time, the 2 and the 3. There was no kick on the 1. It's on the 2 and the 3. And the snare. So he invented that style of drumming, which is crazy, because he's inventing the style of drumming while at the same time solidifying the style of reggae, the genre of reggae. The rhythm just got more tight, and they were able to find the spacing and to get that, that bounce. It's all about the bounce, right? It gets tighter in the years to come, as I mentioned. So that's why it's only a 9, not a 10 or an 11. But we'll see in the later albums, the later Marley albums we review, as they get tighter, the albums get better, the rhythm gets better, the drumming gets outstandingly out of control. It seems simple, but when you really try to follow it and the rhythm that's going on, rhythm, man. So next is musicianship. I have an 8 for a few reasons. 8 is good. Like I said, they're finding the rhythm, the guitar rhythm, they're really honing in on. In the 60s, it kind of had a little bit of a ska feel to it. So in the early 70s, it became more of a spaced out on the upstrokes reggae. And this album pretty much started that. It's only getting an 8 because they wanted to present it, Chris Blackwell wanted to present it as a rock and roll album. So they wanted to add some rock and roll elements. Now, Peter Tosh was the second guitar player, but was not the solo guitar player, technically. It was Peter and Bob were both rhythm. Peter Tosh did some of the wah. I mean, Peter Tosh would go off on some solos sometimes if you listen to some of their live stuff in the coming years. But he wasn't a solo guitarist. He wasn't a blues player, which was huge in the early 70s. If you think of all that music coming out at the time. So Tosh was not your solo guitar player. They actually brought in a solo guitar player. I don't know his name because he wasn't a part of the band, but on the first track, Concrete Jungle, so they had to bring in a guy that's not part of the band. Oh my god. Are you done making noise? So they brought him in just to make it sound, more of a novelty rock album. And, which is cool. The solo's great. I don't have anything against it, but as far as a musicianship rating, 8 out of 11. Not bad, but not the best. Next is originality. And like I talked previously, they're really solidifying what the reggae sound is and was and what would be to come. So I'm giving it 11 out of an 11 because it really broke ground on what was reggae. It introduced reggae to the majority of people. Now, they wouldn't really get too popular until their next album, Burnin', which we'll review, because of Eric Clapton covered one of those songs, put them on the map after that. But this being their first big studio album, it was reggae. As much as Chris Blackwell wanted to present it as a rock album for advertising, marketing reasons, they wouldn't budge. It was reggae. They were doing the songs that they recorded previously, some of them, and they weren't going to change much. It had to be the rhythm, it had to be Rasta, it had to be Jamaican. They weren't going to budge, and they never did. So some of my favorite tracks on this album: Kinky Reggae, Slave Driver, Midnight Raver. Interesting songs, unique songs, rhythmically tight, beautiful lyrics, got it going on. There are some fillers, I'd say, not the worst songs, not songs I can't listen to, but so I wish I had the novelty album. Apparently it looks like a Zippo lighter that comes out the top with a flame. I don't have it though. One day. Yeah, so that's everything for this episode. Bob Marley and the Wailers, Catch a Fire, gets a 28 out of 33. Great album. We're going to be doing more Bob Marley albums because, remember, reggae was just as funky when James Brown was doing it in the 60s. And reggae and modern funk evolved separate branches. But the rhythm being the staple and the backbeat being the most important thing, there's no difference. Reggae is funk, funk is reggae. We'll be doing another early 70s album next time. So peace.